Yes, welcome back. This is F for Rap Critic. I'm your boy Malik 16, and no, I don't have a hieroglyphics baseball bat, but I do have a rap ruler. And if you have not, that's your cue to go to the website, The Rap Ruler, where you can leave your rankings on all the classic albums we discussed, including this one here, the 30th anniversary of 93 Till Infinity. I'm joined by a special guest, the legend himself. Who you be, man?
My name is Domino from the mighty hieroglyphics.
There you go. Yes, welcome. This is F for Rap Critic. I'm your boy Malik 16, and no, I don't call myself the man, but you can. And today I'm joined by a very special guest. Who you be, sir?
What's happening? Branden LSK, as the youngsters tell me, legendary journalist. I just feel like I'm a culture critic, man. I'm a curator of culture. Been doing this a very, very long time. I tell people I've met Pac, I've seen Big live, I've interviewed Jay-Z, I've interviewed Nas. I've been doing this a long time.
Yeah, we talking about real hip hop. I wanted to do this album with somebody who's an expert on multiple platforms. This man is a town expert. If you don't know what town we're talking about the only town that should matter, Oakland. We talk about a hip hop expert, podcast expert, and event expert. So, I mean, multiple forms, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But of course, the album that we're talking about today is none other than the album that stamps the year in hip hop's memory forever, 93 Till Infinity by Souls of Mischief, Oakland's own, hieroglyphics own. And we're going into the 30th anniversary of this album's existence this year, come September, and we just wanted to do it right. We'll be joined by another guest in a second, and this is category one, where we go over the album, the product itself. So you pretty much function as the head of the whole thing, kind of, huh?
I mean, I think there was a time that I did, like I used to run our label and I pretty much managed everyone in the group at one certain time or another. I took a step back for that role of basically running everything Hiero for a while. I'm certainly one of the, the main kind of guys still, but I think that I'm not quite the, there was a time when I was the definite figurehead. Now I'm just one of the team.
Got you. And so naturally, I have to ask you, what do you enjoy more, the business side of things or the production side of things?
I mean, the production for sure, because, that's really my blood. That's my passion. I mean, I think business was kind of something that I accidentally fell into, which I like, and I'm not, like, I do enjoy that part of it, but it doesn't replace, our being artistic.
Gotcha. With no further ado, we'll jump into the first dimension, which is dimension one, the quality of the production. All right, Branden, who we got on the boards behind the sonic elements of this album?
I know Dell produced a couple of the tracks, J-Biz. A lot of people don't know A+ was a producer on some of the tracks too, who was a member of Soul. And it was honestly, I think Casual produced Batting Practice on the album too. To me, man, the hallmark of those early Hiero albums it was almost like jazz. Like the sample would switch up, the drum patterns would switch up, and even mid-verse, you know what I mean? It would switch up, man. And the production was just amazing. The soul, not even soul samples, the jazz samples, super hard drums. It was different from anything we had really heard at that time. I mean, you had Domino on most of the tracks.
I have the man himself here, 1/4 of the contributing producers to that debut album that we're talking about, and one of the, pretty much the main producer. I think you have the most tracks on there. Just want to ask, I think I've heard you talk about it in the documentary before, like the equipment you use. Did you use the same equipment for each track that you produced on there?
I use the same equipment. At that time, I was using a Casio FZ10M, which was the rack mount version of the FZ1. And it was like you can Google it, but it's basically, it was a rack mount sampler. people used to joke and say I used to rock off a VCR because most people were used to shit that had pads, or used to like keys on us, but it was just a rack mount, and then I had like a trigger device, and during that album, that was the main thing I was using. I don't even know. In the middle of it, I think I ended up getting an Alesis sequencer, but it was kind of hit or miss of syncing up. So sometimes I would just play it live. But
Gotcha.
for the most part, the FZ10M was my go-to at that time.
Any live instruments used on here? Because I think I remember there was a point where there was a sample that you said you wanted to use in the documentary, and you couldn't clear it, so you had to get like a local band to replay it or play their own version of it. But beyond that, any other live instrumentation used?
I don't believe so. I think "Living Let Live" is the only song that has live instrumentation, and the story behind that is that it wasn't that they wouldn't clear it. We used a horn sample, and they wanted like too much of the publishing that I didn't feel like it deserved. And so what I did was I called a local. It was a trumpet sample, so I called a local trumpet guy, Bill Ortiz, who had worked with Tony, and some other people. And I don't remember how I found out about him, but I called him up. He came, and then he kind of, I played him what the original sample was, and I just was like, hey, I want you to give me this feel, but not the same thing, And so that was basically it. Other than that, I don't believe there's any other live instrumentation.
Your tracks are the ones that rely the most on like upright bass, where they're really bass led. And I wondered if that was a conscious decision or if that was just your style back then. Like as soon as you said "Live and Let Live" is the only thing with live instrumentation, that's the only deviation, because this is how we do, and let them know, kind of had that same deep bass feel.
I think I was definitely into the stand-up bass sound, and I think a little bit of that was not Tribe Called Quest influence. I think Low End Theory was a big influence on me, production-wise. And so I'd say that I definitely was into good, strong bass lines, and the stand-up bass in particular. I think the stand-up, and so I guess that's true. I never really thought about that as far as how many of my songs on that album kind of have a big bass line. But I guess like you said, everyone except for "Live and Let Live" is kind of that sound. But I think it's a little bit more of Tribe's influence, for at least the stand-up bass ones. I mean, I'm from the Bay, so the funk is always ride heavy with me, and not just funk like P-funk stuff, but just gritty James Brown, like the funky stuff. And so like that was just something that I was into, period. And so I think my style was more like I just wanted it to be funky, and a lot of times that means bass lines.
That makes sense. I think I pointed out that A+'s production on this album, he helmed the more melodious stuff, the stuff that was really like twinkly, and you had the bass stuff, and I think Del gave the most experimental sound. So that's the majority, that's the bulk of the sound bank that you get, no matter who's behind the board. So Del's production tended to be a little bit more experimental, but still safe. This is not as experimental as we know Del to have been throughout.
Oh yeah, this is early Del. This is still Oakland Del.
Yeah,
before he started hanging out with Dan and the Gorillas and all of that, and doing what he does. This was still a little bit grounded Del.
Right.
Still hanging out with Ice Cube, all of that. Yeah.
So the most Del sounding beat is probably the Limitations, but then you get a safe beat like A Name I Call Myself, and you wouldn't even know that was Del's production.
For sure.
Or Make Your Mind Up. In the Hieroglyphics documentary, they were saying how Del would do things like he kept a sample of streaming water in the background. So little quirks that you won't pick up, but that tends to be a lot of people's favorite beat because it's dark enough but energetic enough at the same time, where that's an example of what you were pointing out, not sounding like what else was out. Now this was a conglomerate in-house production project. Before that was popular to do. 93, you know, to have 4 or 5 different producers, but all of them are from the same camp. It's also a showcase, right? You're showcasing what your camp is capable of, and you know, all kind of feed into the same input. Everybody talks about how that worked so well with Nas, but none of those producers had anything to do with each other on Illmatic. On this album, these are all guys who hang out and have one common accord, and half of the people who are producing are rappers themselves. So
facts. Yeah.
On a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest, what would you give the overall production on this album, in your opinion?
I mean, it's hard to say that because I'm biased, of course. I mean, I think the album stands the test of time. That's the ultimate test, right? It's like, how do you feel about it now? You listen to it in 2023, 30 years later, like it stands up to anything. You know what I'm saying? From that era, it stands up to anything now. And so I think it's a 5. I mean, I'm obviously biased, but I certainly think that it's a 5 as far as the production. I think it was different, particularly from the West Coast.
On a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats, what would you give the production on there? 5 being the highest, of course.
I'll give it a super solid 4.
Okay, super solid
4. Super solid 4.
Fair enough.
The jazz sound. But yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, it was mostly a early 90s kind of style of hip hop production. And then it kind of went other places. But yeah, I mean, I think by 93 it was still in full effect, and it went for 94. I think there's a lot of jazz sounding stuff and a little bit of 95. But by 93, I think we were in the middle of it still.
Yeah, it was still like, it was peak. Yeah, I would say 94 is about the closing year for that. And then you, every now and then you get like a Kendrick Lamar that brings saxophone back in the track, but it's not the standard anymore, or that it used to be a go-to sound. So I think really, really interesting phenomenon happens. You know, hip hop comes in waves. All right, so Branden, this is Clif. This is Branden.
Nice to meet you. Yeah.
Yeah, me and Clif go way back to Howard, man. We just like rap nerds and just one of the best rap nerds that I know. And one of the best spitters. Go look him up, find his music on Bandcamp, and you'll understand why he's here, man. But also representing the West and the East Coast. Best of both worlds.
This is true.
Best of both worlds.
Have me here talking about this piece of work. You know what I'm saying?
Branden is like one of the podcast pioneers, man, back from like Combat Jack era. So he was laying roots to this way back, and you know he's got a dope event he does in Atlanta called Hip Hop Trivia, and he's got a podcast himself, and he was just schooling me to some podcast stuff that I need to get on. So yeah, so I got a real panel here, man. I got a little bit of we all half California, half East Coast over here. So we had just done the production dimension. So if you want to chime in on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats, Clif, what you giving this production? 5 being highest.
5 for me. I mean, that was it, especially for a hip hop album. 5. I was going 5.
We're gonna go into dimension 2, the cohesiveness of the album. There's certain songs that cut off right in time for the next song to drop off the last word, and then some fade out.
I thought Anything Can Happen goes into Make Your Mind Up So Crispy, like stuff like that. I remember, because just even with the old tape, I remember I would go to that song like, you know what? I'm only gonna be able to hear 3 songs. Let me put this right here because this flows just like that. Like
sequencing is always the conversation that comes up when we talk about cohesiveness. Knowing when you need the tempos to change throughout an album so it doesn't drag, and knowing when to change what the songs are about. I thought it was really interesting that Live and Let Live is the second song. A lot of albums back in that era like to use the formula. The formula is like your 2 hardest songs are usually first, then your single, then your girl song. They just went straight to content, and I thought that was really interesting. That's probably the heaviest song on the album.
Yeah. I thought they really did a good job of having 4 songs that were like conscious songs and doing them in different ways.
Yeah,
but it's one of the heaviest out of these four. There's four of them, but yeah, I like how they did that. That really, yeah. And they spread them all out. They didn't put them together.
I'm thinking about the samples. These were not small samples they used, and when I think about the documentary, they were talking about some joints they couldn't get cleared. They were on the demo version of this album, like the original version of Batting Practice. It had a flute, and it was one of those darker beats. In that same documentary, Stretch Armstrong, which I think was a really bold statement, he said, the original demo version before the album came out, is one of the examples of a demo surpassing the album. How do you feel about that statement?
I don't know that. I don't know about that. I mean, the main songs on the demo that didn't make the album are Cab Fare and Step to My Girl. I personally don't feel those are any stronger than. I mean, those are stories and the concept, and so. But like the songs that weren't on the demo that we did, like Let 'Em Know and Never No More and Make Your Mind Up, I don't think was on the demo either. And so like there were plenty of good songs that came after that I feel are stronger than the songs that didn't make the album on the demo. One of the main, if you really want to know like the differences that I think was really affected was the original. There's what song am I thinking of? Batting Practice.
Batting Practice, yeah.
The original version was supposed to be the first single, but we couldn't clear the sample, and so then it didn't. We ended up having to doing a different version with a different beat and a different hook, and the same hook, different raps. But the original version, to me, was going to be, I felt like, is as good as anything on that record. And so when I think about songs that were made, it didn't go on the album that I think were mostly missed, I would say that would be the main one, the original Batting Practice, which you can hear online.
Yeah, I caught wind of Cab Fare and a couple of the tracks via online.
Yeah, that was going to be the first single before That's When You Lost.
Yeah, and what Casual gave them something completely different, up tempo, a real 1993 song, probably the most 1993 sounding track on there, right?
For sure.
Straight boom bap, looped bass line that just kind of rumbles and goes. But one of the other standouts is the fact that they sampled before Jay-Z got to touch it on his debut.
Boom boom. Doom doom.
Danny Henderson joint, right? For the closing track. Tell Me Who Profits. I love they sampled it two different ways, so the casual listener's not catching that. Like our ear, we're hearing that right off the bat. But totally two different uses of it. And we often hear people talk about how different the sample for 93 Till Infinity was, that Heather sample. To have the ear, because they sample like three different parts of that song just to make that beat, but it's just, you got to be tuned in. You got to be plugged in to have that ear to it.
And that's where the sampling as an art form really plays a part, where it's not just so easy to just snatch somebody else's song and throw it up there. It's like, it's really an art form.
There you go.
And that shows the true display of the art right there. It didn't sound like anything else. It was original. It was them. It was just, I never heard anything like that.
Y'all both said that. That's interesting to me because, I mean, Diggable Planets and Tribe's albums were out the same year. I think they kind of float all in the same vein. Y'all really think this
I don't.
different? I'd done a separate segment on this album with the homie Branden LSK, who was like a veteran journalist and podcaster. And he was talking about how the sounds on here were very Bay in nature. He said the beats they captured the Bay tempo, if nothing else.
You gotta think, and I probably look at this a little differently because I'm actually from Oakland, from East Oakland. So like, they were listening to the same stuff that everybody else in the Bay was listening to. So you have that mob music, that funk, that Ant Banks influence, but they flipped it and did things in their own way. If you think about it, the first voice you hear on this album is Too Short and a scratch sample that tell me just what you know. I came to a party and typed it out. You know what I'm saying? That's where it comes from. Like, that's some Oakland dudes. That's some East Oakland dudes. So we weren't, I mean, we were obviously all influenced by rap that was coming out everywhere. It wasn't albums coming out, a million albums coming out every week, hip-hop albums coming out every week back in 1993. But to me, like, it sounds different because it has that real Bay Area flavor to the production, as opposed to a cat being from New York, crate digging, doing all of that, or Diggable being from Seattle, from New York, all of that super duper melodic. Like this, the drums hit harder than anything on this album. Even if you got a super melodic sample, the drums are super duper hard. So I think that's what differentiates it.
And I was like, I had to think about that for a moment. Is that something you agree with? You feel like this had a Bay identity, or it was different from anything else coming out the Bay?
He's one of the first, that's the first time that I've ever heard it referred to that, because generally, for the most part, when that album came out, most people thought we were from the East Coast, and there was not a whole lot of Bay people sampling like we were, and I think Digital was doing a little bit of it, but like I think most of the Bay was a lot different of the sound that we were doing. I think there's a bunch of Bay references that they would do, like we used Too Short, in a Tell Me Just What You Know, in the first song of the album, and then they reference Short, I think, on a couple times. I think Opio says she's a bitch to the Dope Fiend beat on a song, but like I would disagree with that. I don't really think that very much at that time, and we're talking about when we recorded it was like 92, and so maybe even late 91. I would say that very little of it was recognizable to other things in the Bay. Maybe in hindsight, right? Now that the Bay is a little bit more diverse with its sound, maybe you could say, hey, yeah, you can hear Oakland in it. But at that time, very few people, if anybody, felt like our record sounds Oakland. And I would say to the contrary, a lot of people think it doesn't sound Oakland.
As we pointed out this whole conversation, like, those drums and bass, the uses of drum and bass for 1993, definitely unprecedented. The closest you're getting to that is like a scenario, maybe 1 year before, 2 years before, on the Tribe album.
Didn't Scenario come out in 92?
It was on the 91 album though. That was on the Low End Theory, 91.
It was.
Midnight Marauders was the album that they were on the cover, right?
Yep, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
93.
Sure. You're right. So that was 91.
So that's probably the closest we get to a jazz sample with that crazy hard boom boom bap. Like I mentioned, Bad in Practice, that version of it being up tempo was probably a wise decision, because coming after a song like Make Your Mind Up, and the last song being Tell Me Who Profits, those are kind of mid tempo. So you need that Bad in Practice energy to close the album out. The album starts off high energy with the Let 'Em Know, and then you get those mellow moments in between. So you're going on a sonic ride. It doesn't sound like that wasn't intentional. So props to the executive producers and the group, because you could tell they had a hand in that. They were like, we want it to go this way. What would y'all give this on a scale from 1 to 5 for cohesiveness?
I'd give it about a 4.5. My only beef ever with the sequencing, I felt like Bad in Practice should have been the last song before the outro. Because it was just like the posse cut had to be on every album, so they had got to have the posse cut kind of on there, which isn't really a posse cut at the same time, but it has that feel because they changed the beat and just the whole, the hook and everything. It sounds like the last song on the album. I feel like should have been that, and then the outro, and then they're done.
I agree. Cliff, what you giving it?
I'm leaning towards a similar number. I don't really have a negative to say per se, but for whatever reason, my spirit's not telling me 5. For whatever reason, I think I'm just hating because I wanted him to rap over the outro. Because I used to hate that, be like, this dope beat, no one's gonna rap over it. Like, let me get some bars. If y'all could have called me up, dog. But yeah, I mean, they laid it out nicely. I thought they laid it out nicely. I thought, I hate to steal the answer. I'm thinking like 4.5 because they saved the banger, make your mind up. They put that in the right spot because that's hard to follow. People already heard 93 Till Infinity. It was a single, so that was out for a while. So you can kind of put that anywhere. People could, you can follow that with something else.
Yeah.
But Make Your Mind Up had to come close to the end because it's like, what do you do after that?
Traditional hip hop albums, they like to end with the last song being something substantial. Tell Me Who Profits was supposed to be the, commentary type song. It's just kind of the hip hop standard. So, all right, we're gonna jump into Dimension 3, the overall mood and tone, the intentional mood and tone. Branden, you were just about to touch on this. What do we think? And this is not the mood, I always have to clarify, this is not the mood you feel when you listen to the album. It's with your trained ears, what do you think the mood they were trying to present on this album was? And did they do it well?
I was in high school when this came out. So like we were living the same life. You feel me? Like, so I believe that they were just trying to introduce themselves as like, we not from LA. We not from New York. We super hard. Our crew is super hard. Y'all heard Dale, but this is nothing like Dale. And we're proving ourselves with every dimension of this album, from the beats to the lyrics to the flows, which they talk about a lot on the album, and the storytelling. And it really just kind of told, like they told the story of young kids growing up in Oakland that weren't necessarily gangsters, but weren't necessarily squares. But at the same time, they did it without being like hella overt with it, which is, that to me, that's the mood that I got from it.
Gotcha.
It's funny because I have a whole spiel on that because that's something that was passionate to me. I don't know if the mood is the right time for me to say all that, but I will say, just like you said, sonically mood, they mastered something that is very hard to master, and that is getting 4 different individuals, getting all of their personalities, even though there's similarities in their personalities, and displaying an album that sonically sound and connected with these different subject matters and these different parts of their personalities getting together and letting you know who they are and telling their story through not only brag rap, but also through some of these conscious tales. It's felt seamless. Like, it felt great as a kid listening to it in high school as well. It was like, man, these guys are just like me. Like, because you get this line where so much stuff was coming out, like either it's very gangster or it's very underground and almost, I don't want to say experimental, but maybe experimental or backpacky or quote unquote even nerdy to a point. And you almost have to choose all these sides. And I think the mood of that album, just setting it up like sonically like they did and being able to display their personalities the way they did and tell their story, it was a whole mood. It was a mood. It was dope. It was a hip hop feel. And that's why a lot of East Coast people gravitated towards it as well, because it's like you had to respect it as hip hop. You know what I mean?
That's the thing I would touch on. Sonically, the right way to say this, it was West Coast tested, East Coast approved, right? Because it hit the way East Coast beats hit. New York per se wasn't really tripping off where people were from. If you were dope, you're dope. But this was the beginning of people really, really wanting to rep their regions, and them making the decision to kind of make this universally solid hip hop sound kept them in a real special space in hip hop circles. But I do think they suffered a little because everything you guys mentioned, because the section in hip hop hadn't been created yet for this this or that, right? Kanye came and really created this lane that all throughout college, you know, Cliff, you remember me and Branden, we were trying to be those guys. Like, yo, what's wrong with humor? What's wrong with not being a thug, but also not being a backpacker, right? I'm not trying to be freestyle fellowship. They were somewhere in the middle. There just wasn't a term for it back then. So unfortunately, they got lumped in the backpack. And on the album, you hear them trying to tell you they're in the middle, because the second song, it's about killing. You know, they're like, I will kill if I have to, right? But what I hear more than anything on this album is the youth. And it might hit different from listening to it as a grown man, but you really just hear how young and how small their world was. All they wanted to do was impress each other, their crew, and other crews, and other people who cared about rap. And that's what most of the album is about. Yeah.
And I was just gonna say, man, that was just a time back then, man. Like, because people don't understand, like, and just a little history lesson, like, the Bay Area is extremely pivotal. If you talk to a lot of artists, they got their biggest fan base or second biggest fan base, regardless of where they were from, was the Bay Area, because KMEL was the first FM rap radio station in the world. So they were playing records. They was playing Black Moon in the middle of the day. You know what I'm saying? Like, and we also had a joint called California Music Channel where they play. That's the first time I've seen an MOP video. That's the first time I ever saw, I think it was How About Some Hardcore. That's the first time I saw all the local Bay Area videos. And we had Soul Beat, which is the first Black-owned television station in America. Shout out to Chuck Johnson. Rest in peace, Chuck Johnson. So, like, even though we're super insular in the Bay and you know the sound when you hear it, everybody else was aware of it too, because they all had to come here because it was a huge market. So it wasn't just them trying to impress each other. I also think it was them trying to impress because they know everybody was coming here. Like, we had the Gavin Convention, which was a big deal. Every rapper came to that. Before Hot 97 was doing Summer Jam, KMEL was doing Summer Jam 2 days in a row, and every big Black artist in the world was coming to do KMEL Summer Jam in the early 90s. So, like, we're a small spot, but, like, extremely important. And people forget that Alan Gordon was one of the first editors of the Source magazine. Alan from Oakland. You know what I mean? So, like, Danielle Smith, one of the editors of Vibe magazine. Danielle was from Oakland. These are OGs in the business. So we always had our hands in things, but we're just not New York. Like, hella labels wasn't here or whatever, so it never got presented like that. But when you look at the history of the game, especially in the early 90s, like, the Bay was extremely pivotal to what was going on in hip hop.
Gavin Convention is how they got signed.
They were very important to Oakland hip hop. Being out in Anaheim where I was, I didn't know people from Oakland could rap like that. You know, Saphir was heard of, but mainly because he was battling them where I was at. And it's like, we heard about Saphir and the Hobo crew battling hieroglyphics, like on KDAY out in LA and Power and all this stuff. We were hearing about these tales of rap battles, and you know what I mean? And then it's like, it's just like being where I was at, hearing them for the first time. If I wasn't paying attention to them literally saying they're from Oakland, I didn't know. Like, I was like, they're dope, and they kind of remind me of me. Their slang's a little different. They say their R's hard. They're definitely West Coast or possibly Arizona, but who knew, right? So I'm thinking they're from somewhere out here, but as you listen to them, it's like, oh, they're from, okay, yeah, okay, they're from the Bay. Okay, that's cool. I didn't know it was like that. I thought it was all, you know what I mean? Too shorty, you know what I mean? Like that. That's how we looked at it, like. And I was like, but there are MCs just like in LA. We're like, wow, there's some real MCs here, and they represent us.
In the documentary, ironically, I live where they used to live, but even geographically where they're from, like in East Oakland, they're up the hill. Like, it's weird because if you go down that hill, it's the most gangsterous. You know, like, you hit International Boulevard, you know what I mean? It's a different world, but up those hills, there's houses. And so they literally represent best of both worlds. They got that suburban feel with we live in the middle of the city. It reminds me of Howard. You know, Howard's damn prestigious university in the middle of the hood, right? So that's what they bring. So I hear that more than anything. I hear that I'm in the middle, and I hear that youth, man. The way they talk about women, very youthful. The way they talk about battling crews, very youthful. The way they talk about life perspectives, very youthful. So that's the takeaway mood that I got from there. what are y'all giving this on how well they were able to put a definite mood across on a scale from 1 to 5?
5.
5.
5 too.
Gotcha.
5 as well. And also for me, it's like some of these albums are, what is this? There's this 30th anniversary. They're touring on their 30th anniversary of this album, right? So 30 years ago, it's like I'm also giving it the credit of what it was 30 years ago when it came out too. And it's like that mood captured that time. It's a time capsule. And even the name of the album lets you know it's a time capsule, 93 too.
Dimension 4, the song distinction versus the repetition. So repetition, we break it down in words and sounds. So sonically, we kept talking about how cohesive the album is because you got 4 or 5 different producers, but they all are on the same agenda. They all understood the assignment. All right, we're doing this jazz, hip hop, Bay Area, boom bap blend. And no matter who's contributing, the sounds you don't get these crazy deviations on the album. But is there anything sonically that you feel gets repetitious on here? Like, damn, this song sounds like that song.
Not really. Like we talked about in the first segment, like they switched things up so much, even mid-beat. Like you could literally listen to this album and just listen to the beats. You know what I mean? Like, because it's so many variations, even on one song, like you'll get a variation. So I don't think it's very repetitious at all.
If you're a music nerd, I can see you picking at how many times the upright bass was used on this album. If you want to be a super music nerd, I can see that being like, okay, this is how we do this bass line. Sounds like batting practice is bass line or use of the bass. But I think I'm with you on that. Cliff, what do you think about the repetition of the beat?
There's 2 levels of repetition that go on, but I don't think it's negative per se. I think sometimes you give people what you're good at. So it turns into themes for me versus repetition. So you get 4 songs that sound this way. You get kind of 3 songs sound this way. Bad in Practice in maybe the very first song on the album, it gives you a same feel, even though there's big differences, but it's kind of, they just stick to the right guns.
Okay.
When the repetition's tight and it's not 10 songs of the same theme, we're good. You give me 2-3 different types of song and we're good.
Yeah, I think they do safe revisits instead of like redundancy. So then on the words, similar words repeated, similar sounding hooks. Do they get lazy?
Not similar sounding hooks, but I mean, there's only so many ways you could say you dope. You know what I mean? Especially when you're 17, 18 years old. So of course, in hindsight, that can get repetitive, but I feel like the song structure, as Cliff was saying, is so dope that it doesn't even really matter. Like, it's not a negative thing. It's just like they were young rappers. They were young MCs. Like, that's what you're gonna get. And they were super advanced for their age.
Yeah, super advanced. So, scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. What are y'all giving this on the repetition factor? 5 means that it wasn't really repetitious at all. 1 means it was redundant, super redundant.
I'll give it a 4 only for, and this is the opposite of what I said earlier, because if no one ever heard the album and they go back and listen now, they might hear that repetition a little bit. They don't understand how the time was, right? And what we were liking to hear. So maybe a 4, you know what I'm saying? But that could swing to 5 as well, because I just thought it was perfectly set up.
Yeah, that's me. I represent that. You guys are talking about high school. You heard it. I never heard this album in its entirety until I was doing this episode.
Oh wow!
You serious? Oh, you missing good stuff in your life like that.
Yeah. So Branden, what you give this?
I'll give it a 4 too.
Yeah, cool. And that's the point of doing this, trying to do this as objectively as possible. Because it's like, if you were introducing your son to this album, you know, does it cover those bases? So that's why we do this. So Dimension 5, the Cliff, you've been talking about this the whole time. The amount of songs versus the amount of content. So it's a ratio question here. So 14 tracks, 13 songs. Out of 13, you know, I've gotten the idea from both of you already that you feel like there was a balance of them talking about topical, substantial things. Is that correct?
Yeah, I almost want to look at the track list before I do them a disservice or a service, right?
It's about 5 topical. So that means 8 songs are all about sucker MCs and other crew. That's a lot of braggadocio.
Hold up. You get 4 rappers, each get a verse on a song. So when you get the verse, like if you get 7 songs of some rapidy rap, it's like, yeah, that's cool. You know what I mean? 93 Till Infinity had different themes of that. It wasn't only MC destruction. It's like dial the 7 digits, call her Bridget. Her man's a midget. Plus, I can get it. You know what I'm saying? And they'll mix other things in. It's not just like, oh, I'm gonna diss you because I'm better. I can, like Campbell's or whatever. You know.
Oh, there you go.
It's like, there was a lot of content in these braggadocio songs. I call myself the man as a whole another type of song, right?
Do we think that's a fair ratio, 5 to 8, like definitive topical songs compared to what you were pointing out, like maybe these splashes of topical anecdotal things in the braggadocio?
I like the content. I thought it was great, especially for the time. And then, like, even in some of their songs, like I believe anything, maybe it's Tell Me Who Profits. One verse isn't about the other 2 things that the other 2 verses are about. Somebody else,
all 3
talks about this, and 2 people partner up on one verse, and then somebody else just says something about this over here, and it's like, man, you get so much content, and it's
there's also the idea of weighted content. That's something I introduced to this dimension. The idea that maybe your one topical song is so heavy that it makes up for all. Like when we were doing Soul on Ice, Razcast, 7-minute Nature the Threat song, you don't need 4 other songs about the government or politics or anything else, because that song alone makes up. If the other 7 songs on the album are all battle raps, it's like, okay, you got that. So there's a such thing as weighted content. Branden, what you got on this?
Man, I done went back and forth listening to both of you guys. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I mean, you have the core 4 as far as quote unquote conscious content. Like, I hate that phrase, but I mean, I think at least half of the album, maybe a little bit more than half, has, I guess, what you call substance or real content, and the other half is them just, you know, sometimes rapping about rapping, but they do it so creatively, and it's such different voices and such different personalities, it don't even matter. It's still good.
There's a wear down factor because they have so many. It would have been nice to hear this album without one of the braggadocio songs, or if one of the demo songs made it. Like, people rave about the song Cab Fare.
Yeah,
I would have taken out.
That would have been crazy.
Right.
That made it.
Because Cab Fare would have been a nice breakup, because the end of the album, like, between Anything Could Happen and Tell Me Who Profits, it's just like 4 battle rap songs. It's just like 93 Till Infinity, Limitations, Bad in Practice, and
Is 93 Till Infinity a battle rap song?
When I say battle rap, I mean braggadocio. I just mean no.
It's a lifestyle song to me. Like, it's literally talking about their life, like what a day in the life.
Yeah.
You guys are y'all giving a lot of credit, but I'm saying because of that 4-song sequence of not really being about anything definitively structured, Cab Fare would have been nice there. I would sacrifice a song for that. I don't know which song I would sacrifice, but I would sacrifice one of the braggadocio songs for that, and it would have helped that balance a little bit. You got to be in the mood to hear all of that rapidy rap. But what y'all giving this on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats for the ratio of content versus songs?
I say 3.5.
3.5. Okay, so you're leaving room for, they could have balanced it a little better. Fair enough.
Actually, 4. I have to be true. 4. We gotta go with 4.
I appreciate that. All right.
4.
That takes us to Dimension 6, the big one. Features. I think we only have 2, 3 if you count them. They're mostly hook features. Casual's the only outside rapper with a verse, and that's not even really outside of the camp. It's just outside of the group. Pep Love does the hook on That's Where You're Lost, and Dell does the hook on Limitations, while Casual does the verse. Question with features always is, do they help or hurt the album?
I just thought it helped a little bit because Casual's Fear Itself was coming up, right? And so, and he didn't overdo it or underdo it. Just have a little sprinkle in the crew, but not overdo it because he got 4 people in our crew.
Yeah. And Fear Itself is the name of your crew, right?
Yeah, and it was definitely Fear Itself crew was definitely motivated by Casual at the time, and so we called it the Fear Itself crew. And I was going to change it a little later because I just thought that was, you know what I mean? But it was too late. It already stuck. My homies liked it, so they didn't let me change it. So, all right, cool.
Yeah.
Casual's not the Casual that we got to know later. Like you said, his debut hadn't come out yet. But it might have been a more interesting contrast to have Del do a verse, because Del's sound, his tone, his sound, his approach is so different from the rest of them. Casual really just sounded like he, you know, the 4th verse on any other song. It didn't really stand out. And he even says at the end, like he shouts out Festo, because it's almost like, yeah, I'm acknowledging I'm taking your place on this song. But I'm always a fan of contrast if you're gonna have a feature. Like, what does the feature add? I don't really know if Casual added anything to that song.
Yeah, I look at it completely differently because Casual was super dope to me. And I thought, I mean, his voice sounds completely and totally different than any of them. He rhymes harder, like with more, he's very deliberate with his words. So to me, it sounded completely different than anybody in Soul, in my opinion.
On that song?
On that song, for sure.
Okay, cool. What y'all giving?
Like they sound like teenagers, even though he's younger than them. I believe he's either a year younger than them or around the same age. Like he sounded like a grown man on that song.
Yeah, absolutely.
They sound like teenagers.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk about that. What y'all giving the features on a scale from 1 to 5? 5 means, you know, it helped the album a lot, or it really just helped make it dope. 1 means it really messed the album up.
That's an awkward one because it's like, I don't want to penalize them because they didn't use features, but I don't think it hurt the album. And back then, like listening, like trying to remember how it felt when that came out, I wanted to know everything about the crew. I wanted to know every new member, everything. They said so many names on the album. They shout everybody out, and you hear Casual, and this dude start rapping. Oh, Casual. So back then, that verse meant a lot to me. I used to like love that verse. I love that whole song. I thought he brought life to that song. So I thought it was really dope. You know what I mean? So I thought the feature helped a lot. And then I thought they sprinkled Del in correctly. They sprinkled your boy Pep Love in correctly. So I was like, yeah, I didn't see anything wrong with it. I don't think it hurt it at all. I don't think they used any extras to like send something to the stratosphere as well. Personally. So I don't, what I give that. The 3 sounds like a penalty, you know what I mean? But I feel like maybe 4 is a good, you know what I mean?
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I would say 3. I don't necessarily think the album needed any features. I thought them adding in Del and Casual, you know, it fit perfectly.
Okay. Do you have a favorite track of the tracks that you produced on this album?
Probably Let 'Em Know. I think that's probably the favorite one that I did on the album. You know, I just something about it. It's kicked off the album. I think the aim for everyone on the track was to like really like, and it was the first song. Like we really gonna let them know. You know what I'm saying? And so like it has that, you know, it has that grit. You know, it's a very dark sound. Like, that bass line is dark. And they did what they did, and I think it was a good jump off point for the album because it was kind of like let the world know. That's really what the aim was with that song. Let them know who we are and what they're about. And so they just came out wrecking it right off top of that album. And I think I was fortunate to have that first song.
What's your favorite track on the album that you didn't produce?
Make Your Mind Up.
Oh, that was easy for you, huh?
Yeah, that sample is one of my favorite samples of all time, man. There's something about that sample and the bass line, the way that it kind of bends, and it's just like, yeah, that's like, I mean, Never No More is another one that's amazing too. Like, I think like Make Your Mind Up was always my favorite for a long time, but Never No More kind of more recently, it just is a heavy one, and the hook is so great, and saying like, yeah, so it's one of those two as far as my favorite of tracks I didn't produce.
Yeah, Make Your Mind Up, a lot of people's favorite.
That's one of my favorite songs on the album. And sometimes it is my favorite song on the album.
Yeah, I think real hip hop heads. I think for some reason we gravitate to some of the beats that sound darker, because you can take a track like "This Is How We Do," which sounds a little happy, compared to a beat like
For sure.
"Make Your Mind Up," right? Like my favorite track is "Never No More," and that's after the horns go, the main beat is pretty dark. Those keys are, melodic, or melodic is more the word than dark. I think when you hear hip hop purists talk about their favorite beats of all time, it's usually the most melodious, hypnotic beats ever.
Yeah, I mean, we can get deep into the whole sonics and how humans react to sonics. Like, there's a reason.
It's one of those tracks that adds to the cohesiveness, because we talk about you having a lot of the bass-led joints. That's another bass-led joint. You didn't do it, but it falls right in line with that.
Yeah, Dell did that one.
Yep.
Dell, yeah.
Shout out to Dell. I just saw him at a show like 2 weeks ago.
He's been going out a little bit lately.
Yeah, he was freestyling where I was at.
Yeah.
Takes us to Dimension 7, the question of, do the weakest songs, or does the weakest song bring the album down? What's the song you skip the most on this album, and you skip it because it messes it up, or you just want to skip it?
I believe, do I skip Limitations the most? It was either Limitations, and then nowadays it's I don't know why. I don't want to say, because I used to love Bad in Practice, but sometimes I don't listen to Bad in Practice. But Limitations, I think the whole time I've skipped Limitations. I like the song too, though, but it's just, if I'm going to skip one, that's probably the one, right? For me.
For me, I usually leave my opinion out of it, but when I have guests, I take a few liberties. I call a name I call myself. That's hard to listen to, because it's like, I understand that mentality. It's probably a rap that I would have wrote if I was that age. When I was 17, horn dog, everything's, about
the man, yeah.
Everything's about your brand of humor, right? Your young boy kind of humor, things that amuse you, or how many different ways can I talk about booty, right? But it's too juvenile for me. Like, yeah, I give her the finger because she couldn't take the stinger, stink in the pink, and all of that. And I mean, then you got Festo just outright about clitoris, and it's cringeworthy to me.
Hilarious.
And so yeah, that's the song that's easy to skip. Branden, what about you?
For me, this Batting Practice just sound dated to me. Like, I didn't even really super like the song when the album came out. Like,
wow,
whatever.
Got you. Yeah, and that's how it happens. So on a scale from 1 to 5, this is where it gets tricky. 5 means it doesn't affect it at all for you. 1 means that messed up the flow. It tanked the album. And so anywhere between that.
I'll say 4. It don't tank the album. I mean, it's noticeable, but it definitely don't tank the album. It's still a great piece of work.
Gotcha.
Man, that album was perfection to me back in the day. I give it that maybe a 4.5, just because I admittedly skipped Limitations from time to time.
Takes us to Dimension 8, Mass Appeal. This is, how many legs does this album have to stand on? We can talk a little bit about the time period, but as a body of work, did this have wide reach and potential? Sometimes your stuff is limited by what you make, and it might be esoterically dope, but maybe not have that mainstream appeal. Did they have a chance?
Obviously, the label didn't push it as much as they could have, which is why they left the label. It's crazy. So the success was not short term, like they came out and went gold immediately, but the success is extremely long term. Like we're sitting here talking about something that came out in September of 1993.
Yep. Yeah, I think about kind of what we talked about earlier about the light and dark aspects of the album. When rappers do that, that tells me they're tapped in at least to know, because again, the average purist would want every beat to sound like Never No More, which is dark, moody, melodic. But you get beats like This Is How We Do, A Name I Call Myself, and 93 Till Infinity, which are lighter, just kind of lighter, bouncier beats. And that tells me, okay, they were thinking about what would work on radio, what would work on stage, because they're big stage performers, and their stage presence is very energetic. They say Batting Practice is one of their biggest performance songs. So I think, as you guys both kind of pointed that out as a song you might skip, it works on stage. So you can tell there was some awareness there. And the hooks, the fact that they have call and response hooks, which was the lay of the day back then, that was the bread and butter, right? You got your never no more, like this y'all, like that y'all, everything. The majority of the hooks on this album were hooks you can chant.
Yeah.
So they were tapped in on that level. But sales wise, radio play wise, do y'all remember these singles getting radio play? How did you hear these singles?
Radio play wise, 93 Till Infinity popped a little bit because of that beat. And then Never No More popped on the like on the hip hop stations, the late
college radio and stuff. Yeah.
That popped more on the video stations. Those two videos popped more.
That's video crazy.
That's when you lost not so much, but I heard of them through. Well, let's get into the marketing part. This is where it translates into marketing because it's not. There's the sonic part of mass appeal.
Yeah.
But then there's other things, the marketing, the themes, right? And it's like this right here, that won me over, right? This is one thing won me over. I thought that was dope. And it just seemed like something deeper than the usual. I heard of this group because my sister thought some of them were cute and they rapped like real rappers, my older sister. So she was like some videos, so she thought they were attractive and they dressed cool. So it's like, okay, so if they push that a little bit more, you know.
Right.
I mentioned some of these conscious songs, whereas I think a lot of the lyricism and stuff might be a little too experimental for the mainstream crowd. I think if you slide one of these songs in, I don't know which one, who can say, a lot of serious hip hop songs would get big spin when they were pushed. I mean, you know, you get Ghetto Boys, Mind Playing Tricks on Me. You get all types of songs that are just hitting because they're talking about something serious, especially in the early 90s. You never know where that could have went, but most of their singles were braggadocio rappy songs. So we just didn't get to see that on a mass appeal level, right? They couldn't really flip that. So I think there was a little bit of this group is a little too underground in a lot of ways, but they had their theme together, they had their crew. The name Souls of Mischief, right? You knew what that was. That was like interesting. You don't forget that name. I also thought Dale the Funky Homo-Sapien being part of their crew matched that whole thing. Because there's people who didn't know any Dale song back then, but they knew, oh, Dale the Funky Homo-Sapien, like, because it was just an interesting word, Homo-Sapien, like, because people just weren't saying that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like,
in consideration of the time period, their name, I think the name kind of dates them too, because it's just not a typical name you hear in rap. It goes in line with what was going on in other genres of music at the time, which is why I think throughout the 90s, a lot of time you saw them on tour with some like grunge bands or those kind of bands, because that's kind of the names. When I was watching The Box, Souls of Mischief sounds like a name like Toad the Wet Sprocket or something. You know, rap names were more basic, right? So that was already kind of experimental. They were talking about how it was requested on The Box, the video. And I definitely remember those days. Like, it kept coming on. These people kept dialing in and calling.
I mean, it was a hit, but it wasn't like a smash.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, nobody was talking about this is one of the best songs of all time or this is a classic. Nobody was saying anything like that then. It got a 3.5 in the source. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, I think I think it was a little ahead of its time, and I think that, like I said, the test of time is really the true judge of how good something is, because that transcends trends. And so, like, you know, I think that speaks to you know, that speaks volumes as far as I'm concerned.
Gotcha. But I love what you brought up about the way they were rapping, and we're gonna talk about that in category 2. But I think that's the Achilles heel for hip hop heads. We loved it, but for the casual listener, and that's what I was talking about with the repetition factor. After 6 tracks of that fast syllable stack rapping, you know, aggressive attack, you kind of want more digestible flows. And I think that might have been a takeaway, because if I think about what other songs on here could have been singles, they don't really slow it down on anything except for maybe
the second song on the album, right?
Yeah.
Listen to the album. The second song of the album, is where maybe Tajay earns them stripes immediately, right?
Yeah.
He really shows what he got on Live and Let Live off top. Like,
Yeah.
he just comes in and kicks a flow. You're like, oh,
yeah,
y'all can just do that. That's really calm.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I can follow that. They told a whole story. They could have made a video showing that whole story.
They really could have.
They pushed that.
Yes.
Who knows how many sales that translates to, right? Or who knows what video that does, or puts them in a different category. Then people get the album and are like, oh, I thought they were gangsters. But it's just, I just think there was a lot of missed opportunity for the mass appeal thing. But I thought they were well-rounded. And it reminds me of a Oakland Wu-Tang, and just New York. It was easier to digest New York hip hop because it was there already and it had a certain grimy feel.
Yeah, and
that was also experimental. Wu-Tang's very experimental, but they popped, and it was, they were a little raw in a different sense. But they had their Wu-Tang symbol, they had their crew, they had their marketing, they had their themes, and they were well-rounded. But
man, you brought up some amazing points. Yeah, I think with Wu-Tang, the biggest variation is they rap slower. Because like you said, they were doing some super experimental. Half their songs didn't have hooks. So they broke a lot of rules, right? But I do think it comes down to more digestible, easy to follow for the casual listener. Because the casual listeners, who's going to dictate sales? Us, people with dubbing tapes and buying bootlegs back then, like borrowing CDs. So what y'all giving this on mass appeal on a scale from 1 to 5?
I mean, I said 3. It wasn't built for the masses. So.
Yeah, I give it a 3 because it was
When you say not built for the masses, see, I always take issue with statements like that, or like when the artist is like, "I did it for myself." Man, you signed a contract, man. You knew you wanted this to go to as many ears as possible.
No, you gotta. I mean, it's very simple. You guys will look at what was selling records in 1993, and it sounds nothing like that. Like labels that were signed to a major label. Most major label A&Rs are game goofy. They're going to be like, "Oh, this is what's on the radio. I need you to make your version of G-Funk." You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just what it is.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think again, we factor in that element of youth. I do think their concerns weren't global yet. Oakland was what they knew, Bay Area is what they knew, their crew is what they knew. As long as they were hitting what was important to them, they were on. And you'll hear them say that in the documentary. They were happy to get the deal. They fought for their publishing, props to them on that. But they were like, yo, we're gonna be rich, we're signed now, we're on. When you're that young, that's really what you care. You're not thinking the fiscal year, how many units. So yeah, I think those are good points. It takes us to dimension 9, the 3 eyes. How fitting. We talk about a group with 3 eyes in their logo. Impact, innovation, influence.
5.
Yeah, I feel like we've covered all of that just in the discussion. Like, that goes what I was saying. Rappers were not rapping physically at the time, like moving their arms and all of that stuff. Like, that's all Hiero. That's all Souls of Mischief. Like, they created a whole subgenre within themselves. Like, shit, even like, Jonah Hill, the mid-90s movie, like, is super influenced by 93 Till Infinity and Hiero. Like, the stuff, it's not too many artists that are touring 30 years after a release and doing 100 dates anywhere.
Are you hip to Ali Wong?
Yeah, the comedian.
Yeah, you saw her movie Always Be My Maybe?
Yeah.
When they referenced 93 Till Infinity and listening to hieroglyphics. But also when I was in Southern California, a lot of the Asians, Laotians people, they were rocking the Souls of Mischief. They were pumping Souls of Mischief because of the beats and the pitches and the cool little sounds versus some of the other stuff that was out, you know what I mean? And I remember that about that time period.
Yeah, I think that goes into what you were talking about, Brandon, with the sonic theory and why people gravitate to certain pitches and sounds. Y'all were in California when this album dropped. I was in New York. What was the impact around then when it released?
I'm telling you, it was bigger than it seems, especially on the West Coast. Like, it was bigger than it seems. It wasn't like the Snoop album, right?
Right.
It didn't hit like the Snoop album where I was at. Nothing's going to hit like that. It was going to hit like the Chronic, you know what I mean? But for me, as a fan, it was there for me as a rapidy rap fan, of course, but it did touch a whole nother crowd.
So it was the different, how different it was. And Branden, like you said, you were in the Bay when it came out. What did it mean to the Bay when it came out? Was it underappreciated in the Bay back then?
Hell nah, because you got to think of some of the first times we saw it was the video. So like you had an element of the sideshow, like you had the old school cards in it. They had on Dockers, jean jackets, K-Swiss, like white tees. That's how we dressed. You know what I mean? So you knew immediately they was from where we from, even if you ain't know who they were. You know what I mean? So everybody I knew paid attention. Like, of course you had people like, oh, I only listen to 40 or Magma, who were super popping at the time, or you know, Snoop and Trey, DU, whatever. But there was those folks that was like, nah, this go hard. Like, we definitely listening to this.
Got you.
It's its own place too. It has its own love and theme to it that a lot of places wish they had that going on.
Yeah, because I thought it would be the opposite. I thought the Bay would be like, oh, them corny underground backpack dudes, but it's not the case out here. It's like, no, we love them. We'll listen to, you know, whoever else, JT the Bigger Figure, RBL Posse, but we also gonna bump this 93 Till Infinity at the same function. Even on E40's third album, he's shouting out Souls of Mischief, right? On like the second track on In a Major Way, he's like, shout out to Opium from the, you know, like.
Yeah, well, that's because they was both starting the job.
They pointed out in the documentary, they were like some of the first rappers besides the Beastie Boys, of course, rapping in the woods, like black dudes in the woods, in nature, and brooks and streams and stuff, right?
I thought they had a certain, and this I didn't say this for the last piece. Maybe it is for this and for Mass Appeal. They had a crossover appeal that was very different than most rap groups. Not the Asian racing to it, but I said like the white boys love them, the Asians love them. They can go and do different tours that rap groups couldn't do for real. They had the symbol. I mean, people got the symbol on their skateboards. There's Hiero Day that still pops off. It's a whole feel. It's like Steph Curry out in the Bay right now. Steph took the Hiero road. You know what I'm saying? There's more people know about him all over the country, I guess. But it's like, they had this thing. They had an appeal, and it was that underground appeal. Like, and they didn't shy away from it. And it was just dope. It was just dope, and it just showed everybody how to rhyme.
What comes to mind when you think of 30 years, still being in the game, still being on tour, still having the impact that it has? Any thoughts on that?
You know, I think I said a little bit before. I think that you know, the test of time. You know, we obviously the art meant something to people, and it still means something to people. I think everything you do artistically pays into your equity as a group, and you know, and then depending on how much and how heavy and how impactful that stuff is, it really helps determine how long you're going to last. You know, and so I think that you know, the people got a lot. We filled up the bucket of our equity off of that record and other things too, but like that in particular, that has carried us till this time, you know. And I think a lot of it, you know, not just, you know, Souls in particular, but Hiero in general, I just think that we somehow attracted a certain type of fan base that was not just into us, but they championed us. You know what I mean? Yeah. That they basically went on and a lot of people who are really into Hiero feel like we don't get our due as far as underrepresented, as far as in the huge picture of hip hop. And so I think that a lot of people feel like they champion us because they feel like, hey, you know what, not enough people talk about Hiero when they talk about the best groups of all time, or talk about any members of Hiero when they talk about the greatest lyricists or whatever. And you know, and the impact that we have, because to me, in all honesty, the real legacy of this particular record, 93 Till Infinity, and probably Hiero in general, is the other groups that we influenced that went on to bigger things later than us. Yeah. And there's across the board, particularly from our era, who have outwardly talked about how, you know, how impactful we were. Kanye West and Andre 3000 and Eminem and Lauryn Hill and the Fugees. Like, there's a lot of people that we influenced that took a lot of what we did and went on and took it to bigger and greater things. And I think that's the ultimate, you know, if you really know, that's the ultimate sign of our impact in hip hop as a whole. not just how many records we sold.
Most of our like favorite mid 90s, early 2G rappers, they loved Souls of Mischief, because Souls of Mischief was the blueprint for a lot of things for them. Like you hear Kanye, he had something where he just gave so much props to Souls of Mischief because of that middle area that they were in, that a lot of young black boys, well, not just black, but just for me personally, like black boys were in. Like I wasn't quite trying to be no gangster. I wasn't on some fully nerdy stuff. I was just kind of cool. I thought, you know what I mean? Just trying to like enjoy hip hop, you know what I mean? But I understood a little bit of the street. I understood a little bit over here, and just I had that good middle ground. And you might want to still wear a fresh little polo or, you know what I'm saying? Go out, holler at some girls or do something, play some ball, like, you know, and represent hip hop with confidence. And that's what Souls of Mischief brought to it. Andre 3K mentioned it. Eminem mentions it. They talk about having phone calls, breaking down lyrics, especially Tajay and A+, dropping compound syllable rhymes. Like literally, I didn't even know I rap a certain way because I listened to them.
Yeah,
I didn't even know. My homie, he know the homie Perfecto was telling me about my syllables and how I used to work them, because I used to use them a lot on transitions more so than at the end of the phrase, at the end of my bars. And I got that from Souls of Mischief. I didn't even realize. It's just they were rapping a certain way, and they would rap on the second half of the beat. I just loved how they ended their flow, and it felt like natural, because I used to rap and want to imitate some of the East Coast rappers, and that just wasn't my flow. I was like, this doesn't work for me. Like, so I jumbled a lot of words up and would say things, and I start hearing them. It's like, oh, that's how you can do that a little bit here, and without even knowing it or trying. But it just like, I know how it hit me. Like our favorite rappers like them, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Nas, like Souls of Mischief and Hiero crew, like it's crazy.
Being around 30 years, I mean, there's not a lot of group that can say that they can play sold out shows 30 years later.
Yep, and I mean, without any public group drama, nothing, without any public camp drama, let alone group, you know. So I had the opportunity to see y'all this past fall in the town. Rock, you were on the DJ set, and they did a whole set with casuals. So I mean, the energy is there. You guys still approach everything like it's like you're still 20 something, you know, swinging. So.
Well, I always say, man, hip hop keeps you young, man. If it's part, let's put it like this: if you believe in it as a culture, and that means it's part of you. It isn't just about like, oh, I rap when I want to rap, or I make beats here and there. Like, this shit is in you. It's part of your being, and that's how I feel. And so, any chance that I can do to continue to do what I love in the art and participate in hip hop is a blessed day. You know what I mean? And so, I think that's how we look at it. It's like, yo, we love this shit even now.
Oh yeah, and it shows, man. It shows. Oh, real quick, I read somewhere that Guapale and OC are considered a part of extended Hiero fam.
Well, only from the standpoint that we put out their records. So Guapale's first record, I guess she had like a one that she put out herself called Closer, and then ours was called Even Closer, the one that she put out through us, which was kind of the same record but with some additional songs. But and that got a little bit more exposure and went a little further. But we put her out, and she's been on our songs too, and so like she's family, of course, and so she's obviously part of the Hiero extended family. OC was another thing. We're fans, and we had an opportunity to put out his record and just kind of went with it. I wouldn't say that he's in Hiero, but OC is a great friend, and I love just him as an MC. And so yeah, I mean we had. I was honored in the fact that we were able to help put out his record Smoke and Mirrors.
Yeah, OC was one of the first guests on this show, man. Gave one of the best interviews of all time. So big shout out to OC.
Shout out to OC, my man.
Yeah,
holla at me, O.
Let's go. Listening to this, all I wanted to do was go back and listen to Southern Playalistic Cadillac music, because I recall Dre in multiple interviews saying that's who they were trying to copy on their debut. They didn't care who people were from. I mean, where people were from. They were like, yo, these cats is busting. And you hear it all in the approach on that first Outkast album. And Branden, you brought up a great point. I didn't realize that you're gonna have me like really dig back into the hip hop archives, the hand gestures.
Yeah, nobody was doing that before.
Yeah.
Not on that level. Like nobody was doing that.
It's crazy because that's the quintessential gesture. If you ever see somebody parodying rap from that time frame, that's what they're gonna do. Hey,
so they were doing this. That's what they were doing before Souls of Mischief. They were doing this thing.
Yeah, the crisscross, right? The Daddy Mac.
They were doing that joint.
Wow, Branden, yeah, I think you just dropped the bomb on the convo when you brought that up. So yeah, you got me thinking about just presence, right? And you said y'all both giving that a 5 for the 3 eyes. So that takes us to the final dimension, this category, dimension 10, the overall timelessness and uniqueness of this album. How timeless and unique do you think this album is?
Man, I mean, again, 93 Till Infinity, it's as big as a song as it's ever been. It's way bigger now than it was in 1993. And so that, I think that says it all, right?
I agree. The Reverend Court grew over the years. I think other rappers bringing it up gave it a lot of life. When I heard other rappers freestyling on it for their mixtapes in the mixtape era, it brought attention to just how big a movement it was. Where does this sit in the pantheon of classic rap albums? Is it timeless, or some of the outdated stuff too outdated to consider this a true timeless work? I know you mentioned, Clif, that it's a timepiece kind of album, time capsule kind of album, because the year is in the title, right? So what are you giving it for timelessness on a scale from 1 to 5?
Oh man, like, see, I'm trying to listen to your argument. You got me wavering, but honestly, like, I take into account more than just only like like a lyric that's dated or some words that we don't use no more. I take the whole thing. The beat, the symbolism, the name of the album, the type of beats, the crew, the flows, everything. It's like, for me, it's timeless, and I'm biased because it was one of my favorite albums, period.
I'm trying to get you to remove your bias. So 5.
I know you are, but I remember the head nod factor. And you hear those lyrics today, they're still dope, even though
that's what I'm talking about.
That's timeless.
That's what I'm saying. That's what we know. So give me both. For the first time ever, give me your bias rating and give me your unbiased rating.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's timeless. So, unbiased is timeless. I listened to it yesterday because I knew we were doing this too. So I went through it again and listened. I'm like, man, this shit was dope. The beats alone was just
Give me a number, Clif. 5?
That'll be my bias rating. Give me bias 5.
Unbiased?
Unbiased. Nah, I'll call it a hater 4.5.
Clif is wild, man. I like this dude, man.
Give me a hater 4.5. A hater 4, because what you said of I guess dated lyrics or something, but to me that sounds like Huckleberry Finn when they don't want you to say the N-word in a song or something, or in the book, and they want to. That don't mean the book has changed. It just means y'all didn't like the N-word in the book.
Some books didn't age well, y'all. They make us read Shakespeare. Some of that shit is trash. All right, Branden.
Wow.
But Othello is it.
Branden, what's your biased number? What's your unbiased number?
Nah, I don't have bias, or it's only a few things in life I'm biased about. Souls of Mischief is not one of them. I gotta say 4, because lyrically it's still amazing. And I went to the 20th anniversary show, and it wasn't all 40, 50-year-olds in there. There was some 20, 21-year-olds in there too that was like, yo, I heard about this. I need to see these dudes live because of that influence. So I say a 4. The only reason it didn't get a 5 is because some of the beats, some of the hooks are not necessarily timeless, but it was what was popping at that time. It made sense. And like you made an excellent point that a lot of that stuff was meant for stage shows. So yeah, that's where I'm at with it.
This is exactly why I brought y'all in there, because I knew y'all were going to give it the expert analysis, And I know y'all know. So like, that was beautiful. That is the category 1 review and analysis of Souls of Mischief 93 Till Infinity, which turns 30 years old this year. Branden, I know you might not be here for part 2, so can you let them know what you got cooking up and where they can find you?
For sure. Whole bunch of stuff, man. At the end of the day, you can follow. I do a joint called Facts Only Trivia quarterly here in Atlanta. My team and I were some of the people. We weren't the first to do hip hop trivia. We were definitely the ones that got it popping. I always joke with my counterparts and be like, if Andre 3000 ain't never came to your trivia night, then it ain't really popping. So, that's what we do. So follow us on Instagram, Facts Only Trivia, on all social media. I also have a brand, which is right here. Drought Season is the name of my brand. So you can follow us at Drought Season. That's DRAUGHT Season on all social media. We do stuff across the country as well as in Canada with clothing and beer collaboration, all of that stuff. And I'm as my man Glasses Malone say, I'm Googleable. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can find, I'm not hard to find. The stuff I do is on a major level, man. Holla at me.
Man, big time. My respect level for you and what you've done for the culture is immense. That's why I reached out to you. I'm glad to have you on here. Thank you for making the time. Oakland's own.
Oh, man. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you, man. Cliff, you gonna stick around for part 2?
Yeah, I'm here, man.
Good to meet you too, my brother.
Hey.
All right.
I just want to give you your flowers for everything you've done for hip hop, for the Bay, and it doesn't stop. It continues. That infinity is not just a statement. So big props. Thank you for showing up. Can you let the people know what they can expect next from the camp, from the group, and surrounding this album's 30th anniversary?
Well, at the moment, we're still on this tour. Hopefully, we'll be coming to your city. I mean, we're going till September, and I know they're adding even more dates. I know they're doing a bunch. There'll be some in Hawaii, but like, just look at the schedule. So hopefully, you'll see us coming to your town and come out and see us. When I say us, like, I'm not on stage on this one, but you see the Souls of Mischief, and you'll hear some of the what I've done, what I added to the whole thing. And so that's what I would say, man. Come out and do that, and then look for some things in the future, man. Hopefully a third Hiero album, we're discussing that. Nice. And me and Dell are working on some things, so we'll see what's up.
Nice. And then we always got Hiero Day out here. So
and it's Hiero Day, September 4th.
So what I'm most likely going to do, I'm probably just going to splice pieces and bits of this in the other interview with Branden and the homie Mr. Clif. Shout out to Mr. Clif, and we'll just get. You're going to be like the fact factor there. It's like, oh, well, let's hear from the producer.
Sounds good.
Other than that, man, shout out to Eli. Shout out to the homie Eli for putting it together. Y'all go check out the Rap Ruler. Y'all can cop the I Used to Love Her shirts and leave your ratings. All right, I appreciate you, Dom. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for making the time. Y'all have a crazy show tonight.
All right, man. Thank you.
I know what it is. Until next time, F the Rap Critic. They talk about it while I live it.
Shout out to the Bay.
Yee. And it all came together.
Sound like soundtrack has started, and let me see if I can move to another room, because I think I'm right below the stage.
Okay. Yeah, I was like, I know that sound.
From the bottom to the top, as above, so below. Hieroglyphics will continue to represent this real hip hop from now until infinity. Let me see 3 fingers in the air. Put 3 fingers in the air if y'all rockin' with us. 3, so. Come on, say on and on and on and on. On and on and on and on. Say on.